Welcome to Impact the World, a podcast from West Park Baptist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. This is where we discuss topics related to how we can all love God, love people, and impact the world. Here's your host, Tara Hayes.
Hello, I'm your host, Tara Hayes, and I'm sitting down today with, we should just call you my co-host.
Sounds good. I'll take
Jake
it.
Bishop. Welcome back,
You said
Jake.
it. Everyone heard it.
Everybody heard it. He's going to write out a contract, I'm sure.
I'm in.
We'll do it. We'll do it. So we're starting this year off with a 3-week series, and we're kind of in the middle of that.
Yep.
And we're talking about spiritual formations.
Correct.
And you and I have talked about some of those previously. I mean, there's so many of them. And this is just kind of a church-wide series focus on 3 of them.
Yes. So spiritual disciplines or practices for spiritual formation, whatever you want to call them. But there are these practices that we do that I think Jesus models them for us. And they're a way that God uses, I think, to form us into the image of Jesus. And they're a way to get the things that we have in our head, to practice those things, to make them actually, make it true, more than just a belief that we have.
It's like learning a language.
Yes.
You have to practice it.
Practice it, right? Practice it. So we've talked about it on the podcast before. Teaching can only go so far. We have to practice it, right? I use the example. I know a lot about how to hit a golf ball. And we're about to go play Topgolf on Saturday. You're going to see. I know a lot in my head about how to hit a golf ball, and I'm the worst golfer I know.
Oh.
It's in my head. It's not in my muscle memory.
Right.
And so these practices are things that we do to get those beliefs into our muscle memory. Maybe you can say to get them from our head to our heart, right? It's like that. Sometimes it's like
distance.
that. Yeah, like when you put a quarter into a vending machine, and it just gets caught. The quarter won't drop.
Or the bag of chips won't drop.
Exactly. This is helping it to drop, right? It's helping it to drop to get to your heart. And so, again, we've talked about silence and solitude and Sabbath, and we have more coming. We'll talk about fasting and other journaling maybe, and some other hospitality.
We have
a whole list. We're going to take 3. The first, we've already started this, but 3, the first 3 sermons of the new year. And so it'll be, you've heard at this point, scripture, and then prayer, and then this is community, which we're talking about.
Very good. Well, I know in the past, in episode 3, I sat down with Pastor Joe, and we talked about community groups and what that looks like in West Park.
Yep.
And we just kind of touched the surface of why community is important. I think this is a conversation that can be quite lengthy, and that's what we're going to dive in today. Yeah. Why is community important? Because I think everything around us culturally screams, I'm an individual. I have my rights and I want to do whatever individualism looks like to you. But community is basically the polar opposite of that.
Absolutely.
And why is that important?
Yep. And we live in this individualized culture. Absolutely. We're all, that's the air that we breathe. Lone Ranger, you don't need anyone else. But we all, it's clear that this is put in us by God that we need others, right? I mean, so example, I don't remember the name of the organization, but Allie was telling me the other day about this organization that meets different places around the city. I don't know if it's a local thing or a national thing, but they meet different places around the city, and they're specifically for moms of young kids to come work out together. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, that could be great for you. What do they get in a circle and put the kids in the middle, which is hilarious.
Corral them.
Yes. But that's what an amazing idea. And I was like, oh, you should do that. And then she told me how much it cost. Right?
Oh my goodness.
I don't remember the number. It's a lot. It's more than we can pay in a month for, her
to corral your
go
kids
do
and
this.
to work out.
And I was thinking about this. I'm like, okay, why obviously they're doing great. There's a bunch of moms doing this. Why? Well, I have a hard time thinking it's because they know something about fitness that other people don't know, right? That's not. I don't.
Yeah,
think
I'm going to go
it.
out on a limb. That's
it's not. It's not because it's oh, these people have the key and all the other ones got it, so I'm going to pay all this money. No, I get a community, right? I would love to do CrossFit. I just can't afford it. Okay?
Right?
I can't afford it. But why
it's
are
crazy.
people? I mean, obviously, it's why are people doing it? Well, you get community, right? And so people are willing. There's this need. We know there's this need in us for community. but we're lacking that. You know, we're I love Sherry Turkle, sociologist. She has a book called Alone Together, and that's how she describes our current situation.
Oh, wow.
We're connected more than ever before,
more than we want to be.
Yeah,
sometimes.
more than we want to
Let's be real.
Yeah, we've talked about digital Babylon on here. So we're connected, but we're alone. We're not. There's no true community. We're looking for that. So.
Right. Well, and you think about all that connectedness really is just a surface connection. Mm-hmm. Honestly, what you can send in a, well, it used to be a tweet. There used to be a limit, or how much you're willing to type out in a text message.
Yep.
And so there's a limit to that, but community dives much deeper.
Yep.
And that's kind of where we're going to go today.
Exactly. Yeah. And so let me maybe start with this. So just a definition to define our terms. So I like this from, it's short and it's sweet and it's to the point. Here's how one author defines Christian community. He defines it as, if I can find it, let me see. He defines it as intentional relationships around the way of Jesus.
Oh, I like that.
So what is Christian community? Intentional relationships around the way of Jesus. And so, they need to be intentional. That means that by this definition, your 1,000 Facebook friends aren't necessarily your community. Probably not, right? That's not really intentional. So intentional relationships. So, I think that comes with it a little bit more than just like writing back on each other's, Instagram
liking
stories or whatever.
Liking,
like an actual relationship where you know each other. And then around the way of Jesus. So it's not just Christians getting together intentionally to just talk about their kids, though that'll come up, or just talk about their pets, or just talk about their favorite sports team. So all that stuff is great stuff to talk about. It's around the way of Jesus.
Right.
We're following Jesus together. That's Christian community. So intentional relationships around the way of Jesus.
Well, and don't you feel like the key word there is intentional?
Intentional.
And as we talk about community groups more, or being in community, you'll find so much of it, the foundation is intentionality.
Yep.
That is, I may have just found my word for 23.
Intentionality.
Intentionality.
I want to be intentional
I want to be intentional. I don't know. That seems like it might be commitment on my part. But I think intentional, so many things happen today that we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. Mm-hmm. But community is very intentional.
Yep. It takes a plan, right? Yeah, it takes a plan. You're not going to just stumble into it, probably, more than likely. Like if you're going to get this, intentional relationships around the way of Jesus, it's something that you're going to plan. It's something that you're going to have to pursue. You're going to have to do something about. And so, just, plug for community groups. When I'm saying, so just again, defining terms, when we talk about community here, I'm not even necessarily talking about the local church. That's a separate conversation, though your community will come in that.
Yeah.
So I'm not just talking about that. This isn't just a plug for community groups, right? Okay, so you could be a faithful Christian and not be in a community group and have community.
Don't tell Pastor Joe.
I know, sorry, but let me continue. Like, if you want to be intentional about this, what this is it's a structure that the church has set up to help you be intentional in this, right? Like that's what it is.
Right.
It's us as a church helping you to be intentional in
but
finding
community. But it can happen outside of community groups.
It can happen outside of community groups, but hey, if you want a place to start,
there you go.
Yep.
There you go. So. Well, I mean, I have several different areas of community. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's not because I'm in 4 different community groups. Yeah. That's because I have friendships that have formed community and are intentional to live a life around the way of Jesus.
Exactly.
So
that's it.
Yeah.
Yep. So community, right? Okay. Intentional relationships around the way of Jesus. Maybe we could talk about why this is hard.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, because this is good. I think
because I'm human.
Yeah, because like, why is this hard? Like, why is this not just like, everything, all the disciplines we've talked about in this podcast probably sound great, but they're all hard for different reasons.
Yeah.
Why is community hard? And so maybe I have a list here. And so you can add how you want, because you've been in community, you've grown up in community, you know some of these, but I'll give you some of mine, and then maybe we can talk through these. So why is being in community hard? Here's number 1. I think this is a big thing. It doesn't let things stay hidden. So it's a means of exposure. And what I mean hidden is the things, I'll talk about more like the lack of privacy here in a second. But what I mean with this is the things that are inside of you tend to come to the surface in community, right? And so if I lived on an island by myself, I would probably think I was amazing. like honestly, I
am so fantastic.
I could convince myself that I was absolutely amazing. But community actually reveals in you the things that are deep down, right? Like these some people call it your shadow side. We could just call it your blind spots. Community brings these things to the surface. I heard this story the other day. There was this monk that went away, and I may have my exact details wrong, but I'll give you the gist. He went away for like 30 years just to live by himself in the desert.
My goodness.
And so he went just to devote himself to God, to prayer, and he does this, goes away for 30 years, comes home, reconnects with his mother, who raised like 10, 15 kids, something crazy like that. And he was shocked to find out that his mother was more humble than him, was more kind than him, was less selfish than him. And so what he came up with was, okay, he went to pursue God out in the desert, and obviously, I'm sure that he was sanctified in certain ways, but his mom was being sanctified by taking care of these kids, right? She was in a community, of kids, right, around her house. And in that, she was being sanctified. I felt this with myself, right? I really thought, if you would have asked me on September 12th, 2019, if you would have asked, are you a selfless person? I would have been like, yeah, I'm pretty good.
Duh.
Yeah, I'm in ministry. Of course I am. Like, I'm devoting my life to other people.
Exactly.
And then Knox was born on September 13th, 2019. And I just realized I am so selfish. I am. Like, you all of a sudden put this person in my life who is very needy.
Depends solely on you and Allie.
Yeah. And I am when he walks into our room at 3 a.m. asking for milk, I realize how selfish I am. And so that's one example. But community, when you're around other people, that kind of stuff comes to the surface, right? It gets exposed.
Yeah. Well, and there's the biblical example of that. I mean, you think about the disciples and Jesus.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm sure each one of them on their own thought, I'd be the perfect person.
Yeah. Well, they said as much.
Right.
Yeah.
They were
I'm the
pretty
greatest.
forthright with that, weren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, because it broke out in a fight. Which of us is going to get to sit at the right hand of the Father?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that it exposes the things that need. And I mean, it can be a positive too.
Yeah.
You can say, okay, this is how the Lord has gifted me or enabled me to do things.
Absolutely.
That you might not be able to do just on your own.
Well, the Christian life, just think about how many one another's there are in the Bible, right? So part of, Jesus even says it, love God and love others, right? Like do this to one another. It's all over. So you can't follow Jesus without being in community. Right. I was thinking this the other day. So when you read the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says you, right? So for obvious, you over and over and over again. And really, most of the time, that's in the second person plural, meaning if you had some East Tennesseans who were translating Jesus' word, he would be saying, y'all.
Y'all.
Like, y'all, go do this. Y'all do that. Y'all do that. He's talking to a community. And so what is implied there is, I'm talking to a whole community, a group together, that you cannot do this alone. Right? The whole Lord's Prayer is our Father, right? Give us our daily bread. It's about us. It's all communal. Yeah. And so it's really not an option.
No, so it's not.
So that's number one. Here's number two. This is a big one, I think. Again, in the negative. I don't know why I did all these in the negative.
Maybe
for some reason.
Knox kept you up. Really late.
I don't know, but they're all in the negative.
Lack of sleep.
I'll do it anyway. So Christian community isn't selective. Okay, it isn't selective. Here's what I mean by that. Friendship, for instance. Friendship is very selective. So C.S. Lewis has this line where he says, friendship is born at that moment when one person says to another, what? You too? I thought I was the only one, right? Like you choose your friends.
Yeah, those are great moments.
You don't choose your Christian community. Your Christian community is put in your life by God, and there may be nothing that unites you, right? There's no you too, except Jesus saved you too.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus did this for you too, right? Like
Yeah.
that. Like there, you look at the disciples. I mean, I can talk about this more in a second, but you have, we've talked about this on a previous podcast. You have Simon the Zealot. You have Matthew the tax collector. Nothing in
Right.
common.
Polar opposites.
There's no you too. The thing is, okay, if someone asked them, why are you all in this community together? Like, how can you be in a community with that guy? They would point to the other guy. They would point to Jesus and say it's him.
Right.
That's what it is. And so it's not selective. We're called to be a family, brothers and sisters. I didn't choose my brother and sister. I'm glad they're my brother and sister. I didn't choose them.
Right.
And so it isn't selective.
Right. Wow. Yeah. You often don't have a choice. But I think the fact that God is who he is and that he can be a foundation big enough to pull two polar opposites together for one purpose says a lot.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of the church.
Exactly.
Right?
And I think sometimes we get so caught up in other things that we kind of forget that.
Yep.
We forget, like, the big thing here is that we have all been redeemed by the blood of Jesus Christ.
Yep. And being with other people, right? Being with people who, isn't necessarily our type of person or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like loving those people anyway. Being in a community group with people who you wouldn't hang out with if it wasn't for Jesus.
Right.
That forms you
It
in the
does.
best kind of way. So let's see, I'm gonna keep quoting C.S. Lewis. He has this line. He says, "Dogs and cats should always be brought up together," said someone. "It broadens their minds. Christian community broadens ours." Right?
I
And so
love
we need our minds broadened, right? We need
Yes.
to learn from other perspectives, other backgrounds, right? We can come, when we come to people who have had totally different backgrounds and experiences than ours, it helps us. It
Yeah.
forms us in the best way.
Well, and I think it helps us just to relate outside of our Christian, quote unquote, world too.
Yep.
Because we're going to come in contact with people every day who don't believe like us, don't look like us, don't have the same interest, a lot of that, but we're called to reach out to them as well.
Yep.
And so the community is a good practice for that. And just to kind of, get yourself used to that.
Absolutely. Yep. And if you want a good illustration of this point, one of my favorite TV shows, Band of Brothers. Have you seen this?
I have not.
Okay. If you're okay with war stuff, like if you're okay with like Saving
I am,
Private
believe
Ryan,
it or not. I was
okay.
going to say Saving Private Ryan's one of my favorite movies.
Okay, well, this is by the same people who did Saving Private Ryan. So
Yeah.
go watch tonight. You and Matthew go watch Band of Brothers. Just spoiler alert, but not really. Like it's kind of it's in the
It's war.
it's in the name, right? So the way the series starts, it's like say 10 episodes or whatever. The way the series starts is you have all these guys come together from all over the country, and they come together in this camp at boot camp in Georgia. The only bad part of it is David Schwimmer. So Ross from Friends plays their main guy who they all hate, and it's just weird. It's like Ross is
'Cause
doing
everybody-
Ross is leading boot camp, and so it just he can't not be Ross.
That's weird.
Anyway, they all come together. Some of them like each other, some of them are friends, but most of them just can't stand each other. Different backgrounds, different everything, different places they're from, different upbringings. But then by the end, as they're doing this mission together, and as they lose brothers along the way, and they go through some really hard things, at the end, what do they become? A band of brothers, right?
Right.
The mission brings them together, even though they put aside their differences and become lifelong friends. That's the church, right? We have a mission. We rally around Jesus. We rally around his mission. We come together to love God, love people, impact the world.
Right.
And we come together as a band of brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
So,
And I think, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but that doesn't happen immediately in community.
Nope.
I mean,
Yep.
and again, I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but it takes time
yep, it does.
to formulate that. You gotta wade through some stuff, and you gotta go through some hard stuff to get to that point where, okay, I am committed to this person
Yep.
as a brother or a sister.
Well, let me pick up on that because that's one of my other points, because that's key, right? So expectation is so key, right? Expectation is everything.
Right.
I think I probably got this everything. I mean, everything I just got from Tim Keller at some point, but I'm sure I got this from Tim Keller. But you can picture if we're standing. I maybe even said this on the podcast before. If we're standing at like a Motel 6, right? So whatever your average hotel room is, and before I open that door, like I'm just showing you around the hotel, and before I open that door, I say, well, here's here is this hotel's honeymoon suite, right? Like
really
here it is.
Nice.
And I open it, and it's just your random, like your typical average motel room. You would be like, this is a dump, right?
What in the world?
But if I started off by saying, okay, this is actually the county jail, and this is a jail cell, and I open that, you'd be like, well, this isn't so bad, right? Like expectation is everything.
Right.
So a lot of people go into community thinking, oh, like it's just going to be amazing, or like it's just, oh, wow, like if we have a fight, like it's all downhill. Like we can't fight. We got to love each other all the time. Like never be annoyed with each other.
Right.
And if that's your expectations, then you're in for a rude awakening, right? If that's your expectation.
Painful.
There's at least this is, I mean, can't think of a biblical passage to back this up, but at least what I've seen, okay, been in enough communities to see that this pattern happens every single time. You get together with a community. So let's say you join a community group, and at first you're very optimistic. Okay, so either it's just people aren't exactly like me, but they seem like good people. This is going to be great. So thankful I'm here. Or it's amazing, right? Like, oh, thank God.
They're going to be my new best
These
friends.
are my best friends. Like, thank you for giving me the community I've prayed for so long. And maybe he is. Like, maybe it is truly amazing. I am right now a part of truly amazing communities. And what a gift. Amen. Like, thank you, God. But there's always phase 2. And phase 2 is when you realize Jenny talks about her kid too much. And Johnny just can't stop saying stuff that's, just offends everyone and hurts everyone's feelings.
Susie's always late.
Becky eats with her mouth open. Whatever. Like, there's just these things of, like, you're with people and you start, like, they're just all of a sudden not the people you thought they were.
Yeah.
You have some...
You're seeing the cracks.
You start seeing the sinfulness, right? That's in us all. And that starts coming out, and the relational conflict happens, and that's when a lot of people run, right? They bolt, and they go to a new community. And they go to a new community, and they go to a new community. I know of people who have been in like 18 different groups, not here, but like 18 different groups in a year because they can't find the perfect community. But actually, where true community comes is when you get past that second stage, when you get into that third stage, right? That's when true community actually comes. I mean, like there's a reason no one ever asks people who've been married for 6 months for relationship advice, right? Like you go ask the person who's been married for decades because they've been through stage 2. They've got out of the infatuation stage. They've gone through the conflict, and they're still together. And you know what? Like one author says, those who stay grow. It's the ones who stay that grow. You want to be formed by community? Stay.
Yeah.
Stick with it. Stay. Don't bolt. Don't run. Like that's how you're formed.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to intentionality. You have to intend that no matter what, I'm going to stay and get to know these people and form a biblical worldview community with them.
Yep. It's not going to be easy, right?
No.
It's not going to be like
and Becky may still chew with her mouth open.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But that's all right.
So so get through those things, right? Get through those things. Here's another one. Community isn't private, and this is hard, right? This is really hard. So, in every community, there are certain things that members of that community are allowed to speak into. So, if I'm, as I've prepared for like different like races and stuff, I've been in like different run clubs. So basically, just groups of people who get together to run together to train for the race. If I'm running and someone comes up beside me and is like, hey, like, make sure to hit on the midsoles of your feet, not on your heels, or gives me some kind of running advice, I would accept that and say, okay, great. But if someone in that group runs up beside me and says, hey, I don't like how you've been treating your wife. Like, have you thought about this? I would say, who do you think you are, right? Like, you can't speak into that. We run together.
We run.
Right? But in Christian community, the expectation, I don't think it should be everyone, But the expectation is that there are some people who can say that to you
Right.
because you are intentionally gathering around the way of Jesus. So if you're not doing things in the way of Jesus, then the expectation is that that group can call you out on that.
Yeah.
Right? And so there is a sense in which, like, to enter into community, you are giving up a level of freedom. I always think about it of like you have two buckets, and one is freedom and one is community, and you have a limited amount of water. The more bucket you have the more water you have in your freedom bucket, the less is going to be in your true community bucket.
Right.
The more freedom you're willing to give, the better community you're going to have.
Yeah.
And so you have to give up your privacy. You have to give up your time. Okay? I mean,
Yeah.
like, there's plenty of other stuff you could do
Oh,
on
yeah.
a Thursday night or a Sunday night, right? Like, there's plenty of it. So you have to give up your time. You have to give up stuff to be able to have true community. And that's where a lot, again, we say we're individualistic. That's where a lot of people have problems. Like,
Yeah.
I want community. I want to be able to check the community box, but I don't know that I'll actually give anything up for it.
Right. And it makes me think of an A word that most people don't like, accountability.
Okay, good. That one.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. I didn't know where you were going.
You're like, oh my word, this may be the first time we have a real serious problem.
We could get
on
that
this
little.
podcast.
We could get that little E beside the podcast, the explicit thing. Like,
Yeah, no. Accountability.
accountability. Okay, yeah.
And I think, people are they don't want to have to answer. They want the almost like the friendship aspect of it.
Yep.
But sometimes when somebody says, "Hey, I really feel like you need to think about this," or
Yep. Well, and then here's so another part of freedom you're giving up is that when you enter in the community with someone or any kind of relationship. So if you get a cat, if you get a dog, if you get a wife, if you get a kid, you are setting yourself up for heartbreak.
Oh,
Right? So, okay, C.S. Lewis quote number 3. Let's listen to this one. Okay. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. So to enter into community is to make yourself vulnerable, right?
yeah.
2 people who hurt your feelings, 2 people who break your heart, 2 people who don't live up to the expectation you had for them, right? Like that's what makes it hard.
Yeah,
You know?
that makes it very hard.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about that culturally. That's what we fight against. We fight against, like, I don't want to be hurt. I just want to do things and be in whatever that I want to be.
Yeah.
But biblically, the antithesis of that is to really build true community, you have to be willing to step into that place where you could be hurt.
Yep.
And I can't imagine that at some point everybody's going to experience, and I don't want to say an argument, but some kind of discord or hurt or something like that in community. It's just part of it.
If you don't actually experience that, you're not being real.
Right.
You're walking in for that, say it's a community group, you're walking in for that 2 hours with the total mask on. If there's never any kind of, if there's never any kind of
It's just
relational conflict.
Yeah. It's just not possible.
So,
we're human.
yeah. And the calling, it's a high calling. And again, I don't think you can do this even with your entire community group. I think, but there should be people that you weep with when they're weeping and rejoice with when they're rejoicing, right?
Yeah.
So there's got to be people in your life, like that's the call of Christian community,
Right.
that when they're down, it causes you to be down,
Yeah.
right? When something good happens to them, you're happy. Like even if it meant that something good didn't happen to you, right? Like the rejoicing with someone may be harder than the weeping with someone, right? It's just to actually want what's best for them,
Right.
Even if it was to be, let's say hypothetically, it meant they got a raise or they got a promotion and you didn't,
Or something that you've been waiting
yes,
for.
and they got it. Or if you've been, I remember this vividly, being at it was another church we were at in Louisville when we were at seminary, and there were two couples who were both desperately trying to get pregnant, and they were good friends, and one got pregnant, the other didn't, and the one that didn't rejoiced with the one who did.
And
that's community.
That's
right?
community,
and
that's hard.
That's hard.
It calls us to be humble.
Yeah.
About I'm not God.
No.
And he's sovereign, and this is best for me, and this is awesome for them, and so I'm going to rejoice with them.
So it's just so much easier not to have to go through that.
Yeah.
Not having. So okay, that's all the things. That's all the warnings I have, and you could probably think of more warnings about community. So let me turn it on you. Like, okay, you've been in community, right? You just said you're doing okay. Why? Like, what are the pros? Like, why go through all this stuff?
Well, I love the community group I'm in, and we, it is. I've seen that, that process when we first get together. It's so fun. Everybody's so great. But I think the thing that we're really seeing now is we encourage one another to change in real ways.
Yes. Yep.
And we feel the freedom to share. The Lord has really burdened me about, I don't know, I'll just be honest. One of the people in my community group, I'm like, I need to be better about scripture memorization. And she's like, okay, I'll start asking you.
Yeah.
And so there's that benefit of kind of somebody getting up in your face. That it's painful, but once you get there and you accept that, it's a great thing.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You grow in ways, and I know we've talked about that and it's obvious, but it's the growth. And this last year, Matthew and I went through a really hard time with his mom was really sick, and they were great. They were a great encouragement.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of been through some of those hard things, and but I don't know. I think it's a good place just for us to talk about, okay, what is the Lord doing in our lives?
Yeah.
What has he shown us through different messages at church? And okay, so let's practically implement that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can't get that outside of community.
No.
And just another practical thing I was thinking, so this is what I do in my spare time often, is I watch running videos on YouTube, things on like marathon running.
I need to talk to you about a different
hobby,
hobby, Jake.
I don't know. It's weird. But the other day I saw this one. This guy was 400 feet from finishing the New York Marathon.
Oh, my word.
And he just collapsed. His legs just stopped working. And these two guys who were also running the race, just without thinking about it, stopped, put his arms around their shoulders, and just walked him to the finish line. And they all finished together. And I think, okay, what an example of community. Because if you're in community for long enough, there's going to be times where you are the one whose legs aren't working anymore.
Right.
And I just need people to carry me for this season.
Yeah.
And then there are times where you're the carrier,
Yeah,
right? You're the ones who get, so I think that's how God set it up, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's there's just different seasons where you're either getting carried or you're carrying.
Yeah.
And you know what? Both God is forming you during both those seasons.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's really funny because Pastor Sam, in a conversation he and I had one time, and then he even said it in a message just recently. We've all heard it's more blessed to give than receive. But if people are giving, they have to have receivers.
Yes. Yeah.
And
that's good.
so, sometimes we are on the receiving line,
Yeah.
and sometimes we're on the giving line. And we need to, community is a great place to experience both.
That's good. So I'll close with the application here. Okay, so you've listened to this. If you've made it this far, you've listened, okay? And maybe this isn't news to you. Maybe if you're a member of West Park Baptist Church, then you probably were preaching to the choir at this point. But let me just ask, do you have this? Like, do you have a community that isn't necessarily tidy, maybe a messy community, but a community that is actually, a realistic community that sees each other for who they are? Do you have that? Do you have people Tim Keller calls them surgeons, where, a surgeon cuts you in order to heal you. Do you have surgeons in your life who are willing to cut you in order to heal you? They're willing to call out the things that, even if it's hard, in order that you may be more fully whole. Do you have those people in life? Do you have this community that we've been describing? And if not, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Okay, there's your New Year's resolution, right? Like, what are you going to do about it? You have to be intentional. You have to take steps. And so, easy. First step would be send an email to jcappel, like I said, jcappel at westparkbaptist.org.
Community.
Okay, that's even easier.
westparkbaptist.org.
Great.
Yes.
So community at westparkbaptist.org, and just say, that podcast I listened to, I want that.
They're forcing me to join a community group.
Yeah. So do take a step, right? And when you walk in, just know you're going to go through phase 1. You're going to go through phase 2. Stick with it to phase 3, right? Where it becomes true community.
Yes.
Messy, sometimes amazing, sometimes horrible. Just commit.
But it's life,
it's
right?
It's life, yes. And know God is forming you.
Right.
God is using it.
Yeah.
And He has called us not to do this alone.
Yeah.
So, He calls us, it says He adopts us as sons and daughters. You know what? Like, if you are adopted as a son or daughter, you don't pick the kids of the family that you were adopted into, right? So you have been adopted by God, and you have brothers and sisters now.
Yes.
And they're other believers. And so, hey, enter into that.
And it can be crazy.
Yes.
But it is also beautiful.
Absolutely.
I think that's great. I mean, that's the perfect way to end this. I was going to say at the end of this, if you haven't listened to the episode talking to Pastor Joe about community groups, go back and listen to that last year, episode 3. But if you need more information, please, like we've said, email community@westparkbaptist.org, and somebody will get with you. If you just want to look at information about it online, you can go to westparkbaptist.org/community groups. And I think if you're not in community, that's a great thing for 2023.
Absolutely.
To do. Well, it's been great.
It's been great.
To chat with
Cue
you,
Leanne.
Cue Leanne. I'm sure that I will sit down with you again very soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to Impact the World, produced by West Park Baptist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing with a friend.